Have you ever woken up one morning and realized that something between you and the person next to you had silently changed? I am not angry, not in a crisis. Something has changed. There are fewer conversations now. The silences last longer. You still share the same table, bed, and roof. However, the invisible thread that formerly held your hearts together feels looser, weaker, and nearly translucent. You might try to convince yourself that everything is all right. After all, you've created a life together. You have decades of history, memories, and routines. You feel it though. Something has shifted. Perhaps the most difficult part is that you can't express it. There was no conflict, no treachery, and no obvious moment to point to. It is quieter than that. Sadder in a sense that doesn't always cause tears, but sinks deep into your bones. You wonder if this is your fault, if you quit trying, if you stop being intriguing, if love had an expiration date that you somehow overlooked. Arthur Schopenhauer would have known exactly how you felt. He saw life with a clarity that many find unsettling but necessary. Schopenhauer believed that change, particularly the quiet, painful type, was not a failure of love, but rather the inevitable unfolding of life. Passion, by definition, burns fiercely for a short time before subsiding. The person you married decades ago is not the same as the person sitting across from you now. You're not the same either. Life gradually carves both of you into new shapes, much like water does with stone. Sometimes the new shapes fit together better than before. Sometimes they do not. The distance you feel does not indicate a betrayal of your partnership. It is part of the silent fact of aging, something few people discuss openly. It is the understanding that even love must adjust to the weight of time or become strained by it. You are not broken just because you feel this way. You are simply human, experiencing the calm seasons that Schopenhauer described. Seasons in which illusions fade and reality, sometimes painfully, takes their place. If you find yourself here, resting in the peaceful gap between what was and what is, remember that you are not alone. And, as lonely as it may feel at times, this path has hidden lessons. When you think back to the beginning, you probably remember the dreams more than the details. You dreamed that love would always feel effortless, that laughter would come easily, without needing to be coaxed, that growing older together would somehow make you even closer, more inseparable, like vines twining tighter over the years. Maybe you imagined long conversations by the fire, spontaneous adventures still possible even when your hair turned gray, knowing glances across crowded rooms, a deepening understanding growing richer with every shared year. These weren't foolish dreams. They were beautiful. They were real at the time. Arthur Schopenhauer would not tell you to mock these hopes or regret them. He would simply remind you that expectation by its very nature invites disappointment, not because your dreams were wrong, but because life in its slow, quiet way always chooses its own path. No matter how closely two lives are tied together, each heart still walks its own journey. Over time, interests diverge, energies shift, small misunderstandings layer themselves quietly over the years, like silt at the bottom of a slow river. The person you dreamed would always understand you, sometimes no longer can. Not because they stopped loving you, but because they too have been changed by the same passing years that changed you. Schopenhauer saw suffering not as punishment, but as a consequence of misplaced hope, when the world refuses to match the image we carried silently inside us. And so perhaps part of the quiet sadness you sometimes feel now is not about what has happened, but about what you once believed would happen, about the tenderness you expected to deepen endlessly, about the light-heartedness you hoped would always remain. It is not a personal failure that the story looks different now. It is simply that no story ever quite matches the way we imagine it when our hearts are still young and untested. If you find yourself mourning the dreams you once shared, know that it's allowed. It's not weakness to miss the fire that once burned brighter. But Schopenhauer also offers this: the acceptance of reality, the letting go of illusions, opens a new, quieter kind of peace. A peace not built on what was promised, but on what is real. A companionship not imagined in the bright fires of youth, but forged quietly in the long twilight of life. If you are feeling this now, if you carry the weight of old dreams and wonder what went wrong, know that nothing went wrong. You lived, you loved, and now you are learning the deeper lessons that only time can teach. Sometimes the greatest distances are not marked by shouting matches or slammed doors. Sometimes they grow in complete silence. You live together. You share meals. You watch the same television shows. You sleep side by side. And yet, you feel as though you are slowly becoming strangers, not through any single moment of betrayal, but through the steady, quiet drift that life often brings when no one is looking. Interests shift, energy fades. What once sparked endless conversations now passes between you in a few polite words. You might sit in the same room and still feel far apart. And there is a special kind of loneliness in realizing that the person closest to you is also, somehow, very far away. Arthur Schopenhauer spoke of solitude as an unavoidable, even essential part of the human condition. He saw that even in relationships, especially long ones, there comes a time when each soul walks alone. It isn't something either of you chose. It isn't something to blame. It is simply the nature of time and individuality. The passions that once tied you together were never meant to last in the same form forever. Life demands change. Life demands solitude, even in company. Sometimes you look across the table and wonder, when did we stop sharing the same dreams? When did our worlds start to drift apart? But if you look even closer, you might realize it wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 small changes, tiny choices, tiny sacrifices, tiny turns inward, that over decades slowly shifted the landscape between you. In youth, love can feel like a constant merging, two people rushing to know every thought, to share every dream. But in age, love, if it survives, learns to respect distance. It allows space for silence. It understands that companionship doesn't mean complete understanding. It accepts that sometimes two lives run parallel, close but not touching, for long stretches of time. Schopenhauer would say that this is not failure. It is maturity, where once we sought to lose ourselves in another, now we learn to hold our own shape beside them. This quiet distance is not always easy to bear. Some days it aches. Some days you may wonder if it means the love is gone. But perhaps it means something else entirely. Perhaps it means the love has become strong enough to allow freedom, strong enough to endure solitude without fear. If you are feeling the silent distance today, know that it doesn't mean the end of connection. It only means that the nature of connection has changed. And in that change, there is still something beautiful if we have the courage to see it. There is a particular sadness that many people don't talk about. It's not the sadness of being abandoned, it's the sadness of still being there and no longer being truly seen. You are still sharing the same spaces, going through the same routines, You are still a part of each other's lives, and yet somewhere along the way it feels like you have become invisible. Your thoughts, once listened to with real attention, now pass by almost unnoticed. Your emotions, once felt deeply by the other, now seem to ripple across a surface that barely moves. You wonder quietly, painfully, do they even know me anymore? Do they even see who I still am inside? Arthur Schopenhauer wrote that as we age, others often stop seeing us as full individuals. They begin instead to project their own expectations, their own needs onto us. A spouse may stop asking what you truly think, and instead assume what they expect you to say. Family members may stop wondering what you truly feel, and instead define you by the roles you have played for them. Over time, you may feel reduced to a set of functions: a provider, a caretaker, a presence at the table, but not a soul with their own secret world of thoughts, memories, and dreams. It is a quiet kind of grief, this fading of being seen, and it can feel even heavier because it arrives without warning, without anyone meaning harm. Schopenhauer understood that loneliness does not only come from being alone. Sometimes it comes from being surrounded by people who no longer see your real self. In long relationships, this loss of visibility often happens so slowly that neither partner notices it happening until the silence inside becomes too loud to ignore. It's not about blame. It's about the deep human difficulty of continuing to recognize the full complexity of someone we think we already know. And so the person you live beside every day may see the outline of you, but miss the details, the colors, the shifts inside you that have happened over the years. If you feel unseen, it is not because you have disappeared. It is because familiarity often blinds us to the richness of the people we claim to know best. Schopenhauer would say that part of aging wisely is understanding this loss and learning how to hold your own sense of self, even when others no longer reflect it back to you clearly. You are still here, you are still whole, even if others sometimes forget to notice. If you recognize yourself in the quiet moments we shared today, know that you're not alone. Many are walking this same path, quietly carrying the same emotions. If you found comfort here, consider subscribing to our channel. By staying connected, you help build a circle of reflection where others who feel isolated can find a place to rest, even for a moment. And if you think someone you know might need these words right now, feel free to share this story with them. Sometimes knowing that others understand can make all the difference. When we are young, we believe that passion will carry us through anything. We believe that the sparks we feel, the urgency, the laughter, the late-night conversations will last forever. And for a time, it feels true. In the beginning, love is all heat and light. Every touch is electric. Every glance feels like a promise. But life has its own quiet rhythm, and time, inevitably, begins to soften the sharp edges of passion. Little by little, the thrill of discovery gives way to the comfort of routine. The conversations that once stretched into the early hours shrink into simple exchanges about groceries, appointments, weather, and without warning, the love that was once a wildfire becomes something quieter, steadier, something many people struggle to recognize. Arthur Schopenhauer understood this shift better than most. He wrote that while passion can ignite love, it is compassion, the deep, forgiving kindness between two flawed people, that keeps love alive over the long seasons of life. In the early days, love is about what we feel. In the later years, love is about what we choose. We choose patience when tempers grow short, We choose forgiveness when words come out wrong. We choose gentleness when the world outside feels increasingly harsh. Passion can move mountains in a moment, but kindness carries you over a lifetime. In youth, we imagine love as constant excitement, but in age we discover that love's true strength is found in the small, often invisible acts of care. A worn coat draped over chilled shoulders without a word. A cup of tea placed gently beside tired hands. A disagreement let go of because the relationship matters more than being right. These are not replacements for love. They are the deeper forms of love itself, shaped by time, smoothed by hardship. Schopenhauer would say that mature love is built not on illusions but on compassion for the human condition, the recognition that we all fall short, we all disappoint, and yet we stay. We endure together. We forgive not because the other is perfect, but because we too are imperfect. And in that mutual forgiveness, love takes on a quieter beauty, less dramatic perhaps, but infinitely more resilient. If you sometimes find yourself longing for the fire you once had, know that what you have now, the steady warmth of kindness, the loyalty born of shared storms, is not a lesser love. It is a love that has survived life itself. And in that survival, there is a nobility that no youthful passion could ever match. There is a moment later in life when you realize that many of the things you once thought needed to be spoken out loud no longer do. The small arguments you once had about habits, about misunderstandings, about all the little frictions of daily life, they begin to lose their urgency. You stop needing to be right every time. You stop needing every emotion to be understood perfectly. And at first, this quietness can feel like loss. But over time, you begin to see it differently. It is not coldness, it is not distance, it is acceptance. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that wisdom is not found in bending the world to your will, but in letting go of the demands that cause unnecessary suffering. In relationships, the same truth holds. We often think that if love is real, it must be spoken constantly, proven constantly, that every hurt must be explained, every distance closed, every silence filled. But true companionship, the kind that endures, learns a different language, a glance that replaces a conversation, a small act of help that needs no thanks, a quiet patience in moments where once there would have been sharp words. These silent compromises, these unspoken understandings are not signs of weakness, they are signs of maturity. They show that you have come to value peace more than being right, that you have learned when to speak and when to simply stay. In the space between two people who have lived long enough together, a kind of invisible agreement forms. I know you will not always meet my needs. I know I will not always meet yours. And still, we choose each other. Schopenhauer saw clearly that love built on illusions, on endless demands, on constant reassurance, cannot survive time. Only love that accepts imperfection and forgives it again and again can last beyond the early seasons of passion. If you are finding in your life now that more is left unsaid than said, if the words are fewer but the bond remains, know that you are not losing something precious. You are discovering it. Silent acceptance is not emptiness. It is a full, rich kind of love that no longer needs to shout to be real. And if some days you feel the weight of all the things you no longer say, remember, it is not silence you are carrying. It is wisdom. The feelings we've spoken about today, loneliness, change, quiet endurance, are more common than we often realize. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing or sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Every time this message reaches another person quietly struggling with the same emotions, it creates a small light in what can sometimes feel like a long, dark path. Together, we can remind each other that facing these truths is not a burden to carry alone. There are many kinds of loneliness in life, but perhaps the hardest one comes not when someone leaves you, but when they remain beside you and yet are no longer fully there. It is a quiet kind of abandonment. Sometimes it comes through illness, when memory fades, when recognition slips away moment by moment. Sometimes it comes through silence, when conversation dries up, when emotional energy fades into the routines of survival. You are still sharing a home, a table, a life. But you are also learning to share it with a version of your partner who is no longer fully reachable. And no one prepares you for this. There is no ceremony to mark the moment when connection shifts into quiet endurance. No words spoken when passion gives way to caregiving or when laughter becomes rare. Arthur Schopenhauer saw this reality with painful clarity. He understood that, in the end, every human being must come to live within themselves, even in marriage, even in companionship, especially in old age when life's forces begin to withdraw, when the illusions of being fully understood by another start to dissolve. Schopenhauer taught that peace comes not from clinging to the old forms, but from learning to stand quietly inside your own existence, not in bitterness, but in strength. If you find yourself now walking beside someone who no longer meets your gaze in the same way, who no longer reaches for your hand without being prompted, who no longer shares the private language you once spoke without words, it is natural to grieve. It is natural to feel abandoned, even without betrayal. But there is another way to see this moment, to recognize that you have always carried within you a self that is whole, even when others cannot fully meet it, that your worth, your depth, your meaning are not diminished because another can no longer mirror them back to you. In fact, this solitary strength was always waiting quietly beneath the layers of partnership and shared dreams. Schopenhauer would say that ultimate peace lies in this, learning to find dignity and even contentment in standing quietly with oneself. Even when the familiar hand grows cold, even when the conversations dry up, even when you must carry both the love and the sorrow side by side in your own heart. You are not less because you are now more alone. You are simply facing life as it truly is, stripped of illusions, yet still full of meaning for those brave enough to see it. And if you are standing there now, in that quiet space between togetherness and solitude, know this: you have not been forgotten. You have not failed. You are discovering a kind of strength that few ever truly understand. For much of our lives, we are taught to fight. Fight for love, fight to hold on, fight to fix what feels broken. And for a time, this instinct serves us well. But as the years unfold, a different truth begins to emerge, one that Arthur Schopenhauer understood deeply. That true freedom is not found in fixing others or in trying to force the past to return. It is found in accepting what is real. It is found in letting go of the need for perfection, in recognizing that neither we nor the ones we love are capable of fulfilling every hope we once carried. Acceptance doesn't erase the sadness. It doesn't pretend the losses didn't happen, but it quiets the sorrow. It allows you to breathe again without always grasping at what used to be. When you accept your partner's limitations, when you stop expecting them to be who they once were or who you imagined they would become, a kind of tenderness returns, not the fire of youth, but a softer flame, steady and enduring. You see them not as the perfect answer to your needs, but as a fellow traveler, imperfect, aging, vulnerable, just like you. Schopenhauer believed that wisdom lies in this quiet companionship, not two people completing each other, but two people walking side by side, respecting each other's separate worlds and offering a steady hand when the path grows steep. In acceptance, there is dignity. You are no longer trapped in a silent battle with what cannot be changed. You are free to love in the way that love survives best, without illusions, without demands, without regret. This kind of love does not shout its name. It does not burn brightly enough to be seen from a distance, but it endures storms. It forgives flaws. It weathers the slow fading of memory, the aches of the body, the narrowing of shared interests. And in that endurance it becomes something perhaps even more precious than passion ever was. Acceptance is not giving up. It is the greatest act of love you can offer to yourself and to the one who walks beside you. If you find yourself today standing in that quiet place, where the fires of youth have dimmed but the steady warmth remains, know that you have not failed. You have reached the place Schopenhauer called true living, loving without illusions, and finding peace in the imperfect, enduring heart of life itself. Maybe as you listened, you recognized pieces of your own story. Maybe there were moments when you felt the quiet ache of familiarity. Moments when you thought, yes, I have lived this too. If so, know this: you are not alone. Aging, change, the slow shifts in love and connection, they belong to all of us, though few speak of them out loud. There is no shame in feeling sadness as life rearranges itself around you, no weakness in mourning the pieces of love that have faded with time. Schopenhauer saw that life is not a story of unbroken happiness. It is a story of resilience, of dignity, of learning to walk through inevitable change with open eyes and a steady heart. The sorrow you feel sometimes is not a sign that you have failed. It is a sign that you have lived deeply, that you have loved with sincerity, that you have dared to hope, even knowing that life would not always match the dreams you carried. There is peace, not in resisting these changes, not in mourning every wrinkle in the story, but in embracing them with the deep dignity you have earned. You are part of a long, quiet fellowship, of those who have walked through passion into companionship, through closeness into solitude, through longing into understanding. And though it may feel at times like you are walking alone, you are walking a path that countless others have also traveled and continue to travel even now. Carry your story with gentleness. Honor what was even as you live fully in what is. And when you feel the weight of all that has changed, remember, you have not lost yourself. You have found in the end something even more enduring, a quiet, resilient heart, capable of love even in the silence. If these reflections spoke to something inside you, if they echoed feelings you've carried quietly for some time, we invite you to subscribe and stay with us. This is meant to be a place not just for listening, but for remembering that dignity, strength, and quiet resilience are shared journeys. And if you know someone who might need a little understanding right now, a simple share could mean more than you realize. In these small ways, we help each other find peace.